Hey, Philip. Philip Kennard, the CEO of FutureStay. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of FocusWire Pulse. Really appreciate your time, Philip. Thank you.
Kevin, thanks for having me, and great to see you. It's been a while since we've spoken.
Yes, in my preamble notes I've got here, you and I spoke in November 2018 when you presented at the FocusWire conference. And actually, it's 2 years later that we named you one of the Hot 25 startups for 2020, which I'm not sure was a bit of a blessing or a curse given how 2020 unraveled for everybody. But we'll come back to that in a moment. And just for those that don't know, FutureStay is, and correct me if I get this wrong, Philip, an on-demand automation, connectivity and payments platform for private accommodation, correct?
Yes, that's very technically correct, 100%. I mean, honestly, what we're doing here at FutureStay is very simple, and it goes far beyond technology. We created FutureStay to enable anyone, anywhere to start and grow a successful short-term rental business. 70% of short-term rentals are managed by regular people that have just a couple of rentals, not large enterprises, not SPACs, et cetera. And that's the largest segment of the market. It's the fastest growing segment. And someone's got to help all of those independent entrepreneurs go from being a host to being a business owner. And that's what we created FutureStay to do.
Okay, so FutureStay created 2014, 2015. Tell us, Philip, if you can, what would you say are the biggest lessons that you personally, as a founder and a CEO, have learned over that period? Maybe don't reference coronavirus-related ones just yet, if you can.
That's a completely separate set of lessons, and
exactly.
Its own segment. I'm with you on that. I think the biggest, especially in a market that evolves as rapidly and as dramatically as travel, is that sometimes the market isn't ready for you. It's not ready for your idea. And unfortunately, you can't just, as a startup founder, you can't just sit on your laurels or on the cash that you've raised, if any, and wait for the market to move. You have to move the market yourself. And we saw that a couple of times at FutureStay, where we predicted that demand, or that the market, the short-term rental market, would evolve in a certain direction. And ultimately, it ended up playing out that way. But in order to unlock that next level of growth for our company, we couldn't wait. We actually had to go to the powers that be, either via, partnerships with OTAs, partnerships with other companies in the space, and start moving the market forward. A simple example of that is, again, why does FutureStay exist? We're here to enable anyone to start and grow a short-term rental business. Well, that's pretty tough to do without connectivity to major OTAs, right? And so we saw early on that major OTAs in the short-term rental space, well, initially they weren't listing short-term rentals. And then, and even ones that didn't have connectivity programs to allow small managers that had 1 or 5 rentals to connect using tech. So rather than wait for that market to change, we went out and set about a campaign working with every major OTA to enable that sort of connectivity by building strategic partnerships. So that's the kind of thing that you have to do. You kind of can't wait for the market to meet you. You have to meet the market and move it to where you need to be, where it needs to be in order for your business to be successful.
And it's an interesting point, Philip, because I imagine it's predominantly startups that are tuning into this session this week. Did you anticipate that you would need that level of work when you started, or is that something that emerged once you started unraveling the ecosystem that you were hoping to use an overused word, disrupt?
Sure. So I think there's a very, very well-established concept of the Donald Rumsfeld's, the Rumsfeldian unknown unknowns, right? That you simply cannot know until you are knee deep or ankle deep or something deep in a space. I think it was Chris Hemmeter from Thayer that famously said, as his advice to startup founders that are interested in entering the market, is don't. And the reason why, and that's the joke that everyone says about all founders, right? But the reason why specifically is travel has such a infrastructure and ecosystem of plumbing inside it that no matter how simple or how isolated you believe your startup or your idea is, once you actually hit the market, you realize you have to play nice with this existing structure that's in place. For us, there wasn't a structure because short-term rentals were such a new divergent segment that instead of walking into a network of GDSs and switches and OTAs, we saw the opposite. There were OTAs that just didn't list short-term rentals. And then there were, connectivity providers that, or the ones that actually just didn't have the systems in place to work with small managers. So yeah, we certainly didn't know. We learned in real time, and then that allowed us to very quickly adjust, create a growth, hiring and fundraising plan to get to from where we were then, which was great idea, great founders, great early product, but not enough capital and not enough resources to get to where we wanted to go, and then building the team out for us to get there over time.
So that brings us nicely to my next question: is what would you say have been some of the major challenges and the experiences that you've had around investment and fundraising?
Yeah, so the experiences have been honestly very successful and very good. I think that there's it's an accurate conception that fundraising is incredibly challenging. There's no question about that. It's challenging, I think, no matter the stage of the business. But the reality around fundraising is that if you're ready, if you're prepared, and your business is in the right place, you can raise capital. The market for raising capital today is better than it's ever been. There's more money being invested in more companies, and more companies across the spectrum, or at least not just late stage companies, but early stage companies run by women, companies run by minorities, companies in new segments, right? So there's more capital moving around than ever. Obviously, we'd like it to be more equitably distributed, but still things are moving in the right direction. The advice that I would give, and kind of from my personal learning, is if you're out there in the market and you're trying to raise, and you're not only are you not getting no's, you're just not even getting responses, you're probably not 100% ready to raise yet. You need to go back, circle back with your advisors, circle back with your network of peers that you trust, and help get your business ready to be in the right place in order to actually execute that raise.
Interesting. And something else that you mentioned in your other answer was around building up a team. I mean, how have you found that? I mean, you obviously have to weigh how you're going to resource that, but also a kind of a technical imperative. You need people, but you need to balance lots of things at the same time, I would imagine.
And that depends so much on the stage of the business. When we first started, we were building an incredibly hungry, scrappy team of generalists, of jack of all trades, that could do anything from get on the phone with a customer to debug a query that wasn't running correctly, to sit in an investor meeting and pitch, right? And that's kind of how you build out the founding team. And then over time, as the business starts to scale, the goal of, and this is what we were able to do at FutureStay, you build a repeatable business process, a loop, right? From customer acquisition to delivering some value to that customer, serving them, and then taking the resources from that and putting them back into the business so the business can scale, kind of flywheel effect. Ours here was around obviously serving independent managers and helping them grow their businesses. So once you kind of crack that nut with your generalist team, that's when you start to apply more pressure and apply more resources to the parts that either the biggest bottlenecks to the company or the ones that have the most outsized opportunity for delivering a return. A good example of that is recently, and our company continues to grow. We're at this point in time, we're upwards of 25 team members. We started hiring very, very experienced, I hate to use the term rock star, but I have to do it because that's what really what these people are. Very experienced travel industry execs. Recently, we brought on Timothy Noling, who was an early biz dev leader at Kayak. And so he's joined FutureStay as a part of the executive team, and he's running the entire commercial part of the business. So you want to bring people like that on to bring some of that industry expertise and that organizational expertise, and you combine that with the inherent organizational knowledge that the founding team has. And that's when you really start to unlock massive value.
Now, there was a word that you said in your answer just then. You said scrappy. And I wonder, there's almost like an enigma around early stage startups where everyone's kind of roughing it together and it's lots of Red Bull and pizza and almost like a hacking culture all the time. When did you get to a point where perhaps you weren't behaving in such a scrappy way, or indeed perhaps, Philip, you are still considering yourself a kind of a scrappy startup and you do things in a startup fashion?
So organizationally, we've gone from the entire business being scrappy and ad hoc to an established set of business practices that need to then be optimized, refined, and have capital applied to them, right? That's the growth that you go through as an org. There are parts of FutureStay that are in scrappy mode, right? There are parts of FutureStay where we say, these are low-hanging fruit. These are key opportunities. We need to act and capitalize on them now. And less process can be better in those cases because you can deliver quick results and you can get it. You can build a cross-functional team, throw them at the problem. And when I say build a team, I know I'm sounding corporate, but I mean literally, hey, you, me, Kevin, we're going to go jump on this and we're going to deliver some results by next week to elicit some change. And then we'll take from that the learnings and put a process around it. So there's a mix, right? It's a new initiative. We need to move quickly. Something where you're tweaking over time, like an example of FutureStay is, how do we win at FutureStay? What's the big opportunity here? It's helping every independent manager or everyone that wants to become an independent manager have the easiest way to start and grow a business. Great. Well, that process of connecting, reaching, and onboarding, right? The acquisition to onboarding at FutureStay is something that is not scrappy. That is very, very well defined, and it's constantly being iterated, and there are tests being run on every single part of that process because that's how you unlock the massive value in this $170 billion industry. So that's not scrappy, it's well formed. But looking at how we're going to run a particular ad campaign or how we're going to launch a new piece of product, that may be a kind of Navy SEAL team, very, very quick, get in, get out, and see if we can get enough learnings in order to make that a part of our process. So you balance the two.
I don't want to particularly throw words back to haunt you that you've said in the past, but you did say when we named you one of our Hot 25, and I quote, FutureStay is targeting 250 million per year in gross bookings automated by the end of 2020, up from over 100 million per year today. I'm making a fairly wild assumption that didn't happen last year in 2020. You don't need to give us the figures, but I think it's very useful as an established company up till the pandemic. What did you do to kind of either hunker down, and what was your kind of pandemic strategy, and how does it kind of evolve to what we hope is a recovery strategy for you? I mean, assuming you capitalized on that kind of short-term rental spike that everyone saw last year.
So you're 100% right. So, I will say this, we may not have gotten to that exact number, but we got a lot closer than you would probably guess. And one of the reasons why is because our focus during the pandemic was how rapidly can we grow supply and the process of acquisition of FutureStay. Why is that? Because we can't control booking volume. I can't make travelers stay in properties in urban areas if they decided not to. But what I can do is help more entrepreneurs in urban areas save their businesses and discover FutureStay and multi-channel distribution. I can also help entrepreneurs that are in rural and leisure and drive-to destinations make as much money as possible to potentially offset some of those areas that were not as that didn't get as much traction during the pandemic. And Kevin, you've seen this over time. I think, as I know you've analyzed short-term rental industry in detail. The recovery throughout travel in general, and even more localized within short-term rentals, was not distributed evenly, and it still isn't. Right? You can look at the most recent reports by our partner AirDNA, which is the biggest and best provider of information in the space, and they're analyzing summer, and their kind of post-summer wrap-up says 2019, we're over 2019 levels on short-term rental bookings globally. Great. Urban areas are down 40%, rural areas are up 40%, right? And so did you recover? Well, it depends on where your business is located. So for us, our strategy was very simple. Pick the levers you can move, pull those levers as hard as you can, and don't relent. And for us, that was making sure we continued to refine that process of helping anyone, anywhere, start and grow a business in the short-term rental space. It proved to be incredibly successful for us. We grew our supply 400% since the beginning of the pandemic. And so again, what does that result to? It results to getting a lot closer to where we wanted to be than we thought we would during the pandemic. And also, when the market does recover evenly, I think we're going to find we're far ahead of that goal.
Okay. And to kind of finish us off, if you can then, Philip, what would you say to those entrepreneurs that are tuning in now? What would be your biggest bit of advice that you could give them, given I don't want to say an old hand in this, but you have been around for 7 or 8 years almost. So what would you say?
So I'd say number one is don't wait for the market to move. You need to move the market, right? You're going to hear over and over again that this or whatever this particular thing you're starting is either can't be done, or there's something else that is a barrier to entry, or there's a large competitor or maybe even a new entrant in the space, and they're going to bar you from being successful. The only thing that's going to bar you from being successful is you. It's either the plan that you have, the strategy, your access to capital, which is ultimately in your hands, the team you put together, and the ability to constantly and quickly iterate on those things and execute and build a successful business. it's up to you. It's your grit. It's your gumption and your tenacity that's going to make your business successful.
Okay, everyone should write that one down because that was pretty good. Philip Kennard, the CEO of FutureStay, thank you so much for joining us on FocusWire Pulse. Appreciate your time. See you soon.